Welcome back, crew. It's a little late, but we are wrapping up our September game of the month, the thrilling Old Gods of Appalachia RPG by Shanna Germain and Monty Cook Games with our review of the system. Today we'll be breaking it down, going over things that we liked about the system, its mechanics, our roses, things that may not have clicked with us or may just not fit the game flow that we like, our thorns, and just the RPG that we're excited to try in the future, our buds. Big shout outs to Not Another D&D podcast, who I stole that from. So we're going to go through our roses, thorns, and buds, as well as a few things you should take away from this system to try at your table, whether if you're playing the Old Gods RPG or you're playing Pathfinder, 5e, whatever's at your table. Just some cool things that I think would fit in any game, and just some cool designs they've implemented there. Let's kick it off. We're gonna go with our roses to start it off. And one major rose, and this isn't about the system, but this is specifically for the author, as well as Monty Cook Games. Major shout outs to Shauna Germain for being hooking us up with a hardcover copy of the core rulebook, which we were able to give away to Stephen, one of the lucky viewers on our live play stream of the Old Gods of Appalachia RPG. So major shout outs to Monty Cook Games and Shauna. This is the first time that we were able to give away a hardcover copy. Usually we just do PDFs. So we truly appreciate you for being able to bring this game to one of our lucky viewers. And Stephen, shout outs to you for being the lucky viewer there too. So that's probably our first rose there. But one of the other things I wanted to go over, just kind of along with the flow of the system, if you watch the live play, you probably heard me remark on this so many times. I love GM intrusions. GM intrusions are probably one of my favorite mechanics that I've come across in a recent RPG. Check out the mechanics video for a little bit more in-depth explainer for what they do. But it's just kind of a cool way for the GM to make something happen, but also reward the player because you get XP in this system. So with XP, you can use that for advancements and buying different abilities, or you can use it for your player intrusions or to fend off GM intrusions. So it's kind of a cool way to both either allow them to advance if they're going to be more hoarders or have a little bit more control over the narrative if that's important to them. And I like it for that reason too, because it gives players options and kind of supports their style. I know some of my players are more optimizers and rather have that advancement through the mechanics. Some would rather have that control of the story and let's both do whatever they want with it. So major shout out there. It's just a fun one from the game master side. It's so often I've set up events in Pathfinder, D&D, and the roles have just been against me for having that event set up. This way you can say, no, this is happening. How are you guys going to come across it? So I really like that. That's something I'm going to be stealing for other games as well. Let's pick on Pathfinder or 5e even. You could easily replace the XP given away with this to inspiration for D&D or hero points for Pathfinder. And still kind of keep that same mechanic where the player that you've done whatever this is to gets one hero point, and they can give another hero point away to one of their players at the table. So I'm going to be stealing this from our Pathfinder 2e game, but definitely one that you could bring into other systems. I just really liked it. It's just one of those things. Helps you as a game master create narrative tension. You can make things happen, but still rewards the players and still gives players the options to kind of opt out a little bit too, in case they want to burn their own XP to go get out of it. So really cool one. Shout out to Monica Games System because that's definitely one of my favorites I've come across recently. Right along with the system too. The system itself is pretty easy to learn. I know both or two of my players at least. I hadn't really taken a deep dive into the mechanics of the system, but they were able to easily pick it up as we were playing. It definitely kind of fits the narrative feel of the Old Gods podcast. Which let's pause there real quick. If you haven't checked out the Old Gods of Appalachia podcast, go check it out. It's amazing. Good kind of folksy horror, folksy eldritch horror is the way I describe it. It's really cool, really in depth. They just started their fourth season, and my wife and I are kind of catching back up, and it's definitely one that we love. My only complaint for the Old Gods of Appalachia podcast, a thorn for them, is they should have a recap because sometimes it's a little long between them, but overall, very good. Definitely worth checking out. If you like the podcast, check out the RPG because the RPG does fit a lot of the themes of the podcast. Really kind of bringing in kind of some of the core central themes and making it easy for you as a game master to kind of bring those to the table, along with it being very easy to learn. So definitely kind of a couple roses mixed in with that one. Another big one too, and you guys can kind of see it just from the cover. As I said, I think check out our interview with Shanna Germain tomorrow. But as I said with the interview, I think this is my favorite cover that I've got of all my RPGs on my shelf. I've got about 30 of them or so. This cover just really captures the feel of the Old Gods universe and just really definitely kind of evokes a good tone for the book. And the artwork as a whole for the book is amazing. So definitely a major rose for that side. They knocked it out of the park there. They kind of captured that tone, especially at the start with the cover. I like kind of like the minimalistic design with it too. It just perfect. So major rose on that side. One of the things, kind of diving into the mechanics a little bit more that I loved for the system, it's kind of how you build your character. Go check out our character build video. Well, one of the big things that you do is you kind of make a sentence as you're building your character, going over your descriptors and focus. So I like how they did that. It helps you kind of, it gives you that elevator pitch, for lack of a better way to say it, to describe your character. And I think it was helpful for both myself when I just kind of did my own little kind of white room build, but even for my players as they're kind of preparing for the session because they got to know a little bit about their character just from how they would introduce them from how the descriptors fit in. I liked some of the abilities that came with it. It was just kind of a unique way I've never really seen a system do it before, and I liked how it kind of helped encourage people to think of the narrative elements of the different abilities and kind of backgrounds and descriptors that they're taking. So definitely one of my favorites there. Uh, Another big one too is mechanics of the system. This is my first time trying out a Cypher system, and I was a little unsure how it would feel to play with kind of how they have the difficulty tiers set up and how they have the dice rolling mechanics. Because this one it's a D20 system, but rather than add modifiers like you would for Pathfinder or D&D or a lot of the other D&D clones, with this one just roll the straight D20 and the game master will set the target or the difficulty tier, which will give you a target number. A little bit of multiplication involved there, but luckily they have a table, so you don't have to multiply in your head. Because the difficulty tier or the target number will be three times the difficulty tier. And that kind of determines whether you're successful or not. It is a binary system on that side. But I thought it was a cool way to do it because it is fast once you get into it. As the game master, you have that little table ahead of you, and you can kind of determine if this is something standard difficulty or challenging, and you can throw out those DCs. Players can bring in elements, whether it be their assets or how they set themselves up. To ease the target number down, so kind of bringing it down difficulty tiers, which is cool because I think it encouraged players, at least in my session, to act more creatively and kind of look for ways outside of the box or use different assets to really kind of bring those target numbers down. And really make sure they're getting the kind of the best opportunity they can to be successful, and I like that. And kind of the same thing with hindrances too. If you put yourself in a bad position, the game master can kind of raise those difficulties and just really kind of have the narrative reflect on the roles without it getting crazy math that you have to do. Or even with the game master, it's pretty easy to set those DCs. One thing I'll probably say it takes a little bit of work though, is just to kind of make sure you're setting those fairly sometimes. Because I without the modifiers, I think that's probably my own brain coming from D&D and Pathfinder is like, I don't know the percentages of these to be successful without knowing exactly what eases and hindrances players can bring to the table. But sometimes they'll surprise you on that one. So definitely one that'll take a little bit to get used to rolling out. But one that I liked and enjoyed. It was very kind of quick to get into the mindset of it, and it flowed well. And even not having the modifiers, I think, kind of flowed well because it made people's dice rolls a little bit quicker because we went old school and hand rolled our dice, and I think it just kind of made things flow well and kind of kept with the narrative feel of the system and the podcast. Because one of the things that sometimes mechanics can do is slow down the narrative, where you have to kind of take too much time out to think about the mechanics. And I think these ones kind of flowed well and kind of kept that narrative moving, which is exactly what you need to do to fit this genre. So big rose there. Uh, Another, probably my biggest rose. This is probably the rose that I haven't really seen too much with other systems, or on this scale, I should say, with other systems, because this book has so many resources for helping the game master understand both the world of Old Gods of Appalachia, but also things like the two adventures in the core rulebook. Two separate, distinct adventures in the game book, which some games usually give you like usually one quickie if you're lucky, just to kind of go through the game's mechanics. A lot of them usually will have it in a separate book, but this one threw out two different adventures you could run with you and your crew, just right in the core rule book. So that's really cool. I think that's a good thing to have, especially for showing people how your gameplay loop works. So big shout out there. But they also have different kind of sections where you can learn about the areas of the Appalachia, kind of both their true history as well as history and kind of the podcast story, as well as a really cool beat theory that shows you and gives you tips to how to run some of these creepy and horrific monsters, and kind of showing you how to utilize them against the party and how to actually even have them interact with the party, which I think is so helpful. I mean, I've seen so many monster manuals where they'll give you like a huge lore description of the character, but usually you just have like the attack blocks where there's not really anything in them to show you, hey, this is how you interact with the players with it. So I think that's really cool. So major shout outs for how many just tools they gave the game master to help the game run smoothly. So really big ups there. Last big thing I'll say with this one too. This is my first time with the cipher system, but I really like how the ciphers work. Unfortunately, I didn't get to a chance to do a cipher video. Work's been killing me lately. But the ciphers in the game basically are these usual one-use items, typically, that you get that can be like magic items that give you some cool resources that you can use. And I like them because they're limited use, so you can kind of spoil players with them and give them out without having to worry about them getting too overpowered because they'll either be one use or a couple of the ones we had are roll a d6 or roll a d4 and get so many uses out of that. So I like them because they're unique. You can kind of tie them into the story and give players the powerful abilities that they always want without really disrupting game balance too much. So definitely a major rose there. But those are kind of the big roses for the system. Definitely a game that I liked. Definitely one that I'd throw in my reputation or kind of rotation again. Hopefully one day I'll get my wife to play. She loves the podcast, but not a huge gamer. But let's kind of transition from the roses over to the thorns. Some things we may not have liked as much with the system. One I'll say is a little bit of a thorn for me. It may not be for everybody, and then this was intentionally designed this way by the Cipher system. I wish there were more guidelines for building balanced encounters. And with that, 'cause I know it's a horror game, and old gods, you're not always going to be balanced against these horrors that you go up against. But it's always nice for me to know kind of where the line of balance is, so I can go above it, below it, kind of how I can tweak around with it. Because with some of the fights, I wasn't sure how the players would do. They actually came out successful in all of them, even the Hollow Man fight, which I was a little worried about. But I was just kind of I was guesstimating on that side. So that thorn on my side, and that's probably me spending too much time with Pathfinder and D&D, and I'm loving kind of that core balance elements. But for it's a horror game, so it's not truly needed to have that balance. But it'll be one that I like to know just to know where the line is, so I can make sure they're when they're put in those horrific situations where they should definitely run, that they actually have to run. So outside of that, Thorn, another one I bring in is I wish there were a little bit more mechanics in kind of the horror side, like some stress or panic mechanics, like similar to Aliens and some of the other horror games we played on the stream. But overall, that's a real small thorn. It's definitely, and as I was thinking about, I'm not sure if it would super fit the old gods kind of mythos, but it's something I kind of wanted in there too, just to add that extra element of kind of horror on that side. The last one, and this one's kind of a moderate thorn, I'll say. I wish there were a little bit more summaries and somewhat a little bit different organization of some of the core mechanical content within the books. The book is definitely well designed, well kind of written, but sometimes a little, some parts were a little bit harder to find the mechanical info you were looking for, and it wasn't laid out sometimes the way I would have expected. But this one's just kind of a thorn for me. I'm not sure everybody may have that same experience on that side. But overall, really enjoyed it. Loved the mechanics, loved kind of how it flowed, loved how it captured that old gods mythos with it. And one thing I'll say kind of the buds of the system is I want to kind of dive into some of the more of the resources that they offered. Because really, as I said, this is probably the thing that shines most with the system is how much they provide the game master to be able to go and run the game. Um, I would love to kind of take a little deeper look into the bestiary that they provided and kind of bring out some more of those monsters that are fun because they all had such good artwork and descriptions. Like I had to go through and trim out half of the monsters that I wanted to run in this one shot because there just wasn't time with it. And that's what they throw at the rose too. Combat's pretty quick in the system. The way they resolve damage, the way they resolve attacks, and with this, it's another kind of thing too. It's always players rolling in the system, so it does kind of go quickly usually. So definitely one that you can kind of have some. We had three or four fights, three fights in our one shot, and it still ran quickly. We didn't get bogged down in combat, so definitely kind of a good fit with the narrative. And I'll kind of give a little mini thought on that side as a game master too. I love rolling dice, but this one it is the players rolling the dice for both attack, defense, everything that'll be going on will be a player dice roll. But the cool thing is the DMs don't get that discourage you because you have GM intrusions, which are amazing. But definitely full system. Love to dive into the bestiary a little bit more. I truly had a blast playing this, especially with how much I love the podcast. And I was happy to get a chance to bring that to the table and come up with my own little kooky adventure within the old gods of Appalachia world. So, in the comments, shout out some things you guys liked about the system. Something that you guys thought was interesting with the mechanics, or just kind of flowed well, or even your favorite piece of artwork in the system, because I think there's just the artwork is amazing overall. But next big thing that we're going to be doing is we're getting into our October game of the month, and we're going to be keeping up the horror theme, and we're getting into Vampire the Masquerade, 5th edition, but it's not a D&D clone. So check this out. We'll be launching our first impressions next week, so stay tuned for that. But definitely like, subscribe. As always, each month we'll pick a new game of the month and kind of break it all the way down from how to build a PC, core mechanics, to our live actual play. So check us out on that side, and thanks for watching, crew.